Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here at Debden Grange. And do you mind if I say, are you sitting comfortably? I hope you are, because it's such a hot day. I hope you are all very comfortable, because we're going to be here for the next hour. And I know that you're going to want to hear what all of our guests have to say. So let me begin by introducing you to the guests that I have with me here in our studio, starting with Zoe Rockall. Now, she's the Executive Director at the Retirement Villages Group, sadly not with us, but actually on the screen and joining us on Zoom, but we're delighted to have Zoe with us. But in the studio here with me, I have Gareth Lyon, who's Head of Policy and Communications at ARCO, which is the Associated Retirement Community Operators. I've got Anne-Marie Nicholson, who is Principal and an Architect at Life 3A, and Mark Wilkinson, who's a partner at Hoare Lea, and indeed they are our hosts today. Now, I'm sure that some of you will know, probably all, of our guests in the studio today, because you will have worked with them already professionally, but I doubt that you will know the two guests that I have here on my right, and that's Pauline McKenzie and Chris Johnson. They are very special guests in our programme today, but I'll tell you a bit more about them a bit later on. First of all, I think what you probably know about each of our principal guests is that they each bring a very special and individual expertise to the whole subject of accommodation for those in the community who are 60 plus. Now, we really cannot generalise about this generation and this age group. There are always going to be those who are absolutely determined and indeed able to live in their own homes, a totally independent life until the day they die. For others, the word retirement will just be anathema, and there will be some for whom, of course, physical or mental conditions will eventually make the decision about where and how they live for them. But there's, in the middle of all of that, an entire tranche of individuals for whom life in a community that is geared specifically for the needs of a more senior generation really does have a very huge appeal. Life in a community like this one at Debden Grange, where you have total independence, but with benefits, meaning that you're never going to be lonely. You're never going to have to worry about finding that extra bit of help that you might need as the years begin to take their toll. Having company and facilities that mean you really never have to think about what you're going to do to fill your day. And knowing that you can always close the door on your own home, be as private as you really want, or open it and be part of a genuine social network. Now, it's estimated that by 2040, 1 in 4 people in the United Kingdom will be over 65. So where are those people going to live, and how are they going to live? The possibilities are absolutely endless, and they potentially offer serious growth in providing retirement communities. Now, to quote a recent report by Hoare Lea, clearly later living, perception and provision is in need of a complete transformation. Well, how is that transformation going to be achieved? That's what we hope to explore during the next hour with my guests here in the studio, and indeed with you who are watching it from your homes and your offices. And there are, of course, many aspects to this question. But for starters, let's tackle one of the negatives that really overshadow this whole question. Again, to quote a recent Hoare Lea research document, we are in a country where a mass perception is that downsizing and moving into a retirement environment is an admission of weakness, one that people only make when they're forced into it and have no other option. In other words, the idea of living in a retirement community or village has a real image problem. And how are we going to start to overcome that? Well, let's begin by asking my 4 panelists. Zoe, what do you reckon you've got to do to overcome the image that people have of retirement living?
I think to begin with, we sort of have to change the negative perception of what it is to live in a retirement village, and really sort of share the message that it's about people being able to live and thrive in a place. So being part of that wider community gives them the opportunity to continue living their life as they wish to over the years, but with that element of care supporting them should they need it at a time that they need it.
And you know about this because, of course, your company, you've got, 16 of these villages around the country, haven't you?
Yes, of which you're in one and I'm not. Yes, we've got 40 40 years of experience, and we're sort of building on that to continue reviewing what works well for us, what do our residents currently want, and what do the residents of the future want as well. So as the demographics change, as people age, and they age, and we have more people over the age of 75. As you said, we have a very diverse range of people, so they have diverse needs. So we need to be really keen on listening to what people want, taking into account what their needs could be now and in the future as well. So not just going by what we've done before, but to look to what people might want for, in the future.
Given us lots to think about at the very start, Gareth, would you like to pick it up?
Yes, thank you very much. And just to say, I want to pick up where you got to with that, I think that's a very important distinction, that the kind of villages that the Retirement Villages Group run and that our members operate are housing for older people, where you have the option of care available on site, you've got support available if you need it, facilities, and obviously you've got huge benefits of being part of a community. And that's where we see the real shortage of provision in the UK. So we've only got about a tenth of the level of provision in the UK per head of population that they have in other countries. And part of the problem is there's a lack of clarity over terminology. People can't refer specifically to a retirement village or an extra care site because people are not really familiar with them, and there's not really government legislation that makes it clear this is what they are.
Well, I'm going to take you up on that a little bit later on, I think, because that's a really important area that we need to cover. But in the meantime, Anne-Marie, what's your solution to that question? How do you improve the image?
I think build more and build them really well. Design them well, do the research, make sure they're built in the right places, make sure you talk to the local community about what they want, because not one size fits all. So we can have some fundamental design principles, good design, but actually making them bespoke to where they are, to where people are living is really important. So we've got town centres, you can go up to a high rise, maybe 5 or 6 stories. I think we're here in 2 or 3 stories in this village, and it's not just about the shape, it's about what's in them and what the provision is.
But make them desirable at every level. And Mark, what about your own ideas?
Well, I think we need to get away from the perception that these villages are areas with lots of call alarms and grab rails and red buttons, and actually realise that they've got fantastic facilities for the whole community. You come into a restaurant like this isn't a restaurant for old people, this is a restaurant for everyone, somewhere everyone wants to be. And we need to just open that up to the public and make them aware that actually in this space we're designing buildings just as well, if not better, than the whole residential sector. And as you say, you're getting all the benefits of fantastic amenities.
To get the local community in and let them see that maybe this is where they'd like to spend their senior years.
Yes,
well,
definitely.
I said that I was going to introduce you to our 2 special guests, and they are sat here, and we've got Chris and Pauline. Now, they're special because they are actually residents here at the Grange. Now, Chris, tell me first of all briefly, why did you want to come? Because you represent the customers. And so you know what you were looking for, and you can tell me whether or not you got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I lived in a 5-bedroom property, not very far from here, within Newport, and my husband passed away 3 years ago, and I had this big house. I mean, I had lots of friends, but I really wanted to keep this big house in good order. But when silly things happen, I was saying, like grass in the gutter, where do you find somebody to get grass out the gutter? And things like that. I thought, what should I be doing? Should I downsize? Not quite sure about that, because I thought, as I get older, I may need help and assistance, and it would mean downsizing, then going somewhere else. So I thought, well, and I knew they were building this. I think I'll go into Saffron Walden, and I knew there was a sales shop in Saffron Walden, and Lisa Marie was there, and we discussed it, and what shall I do, I thought, well, I said, I'll think about it, and I will come back. And the following week I came back with my neighbour, my neighbour Peter, who is an architect, and I said to Peter, he said, come on Chris, I'll come with you. So he looked at it, he said, it's very nice there, I said, yes, it does look very attractive. So Lisa Marie had this layout, and I thought...
You found an apartment that you liked, did you?
No, I live in a cottage.
Oh, a cottage.
A cottage. I like the space. Having 5 bedrooms, you like the space. So I looked and looked. So I said to Lisa Marie, I'll have that one. And she said, really? I said, yes, that one. And then I came back home and I walked all the way round and I stood by the fence over. I said, that's what I've got. I like that.
Pauline, what was your story then?
My situation was I lived next door one to my daughter and family, looked after the grandchildren. My husband, I'd lost him 8 years prior to moving, but I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Nobody knows to how extent that is going to affect you. And I spoke to my family and decided I needed to think. I had a house, a cottage that needed looking after, but I had to think about me as well. And I didn't want to become a burden to the family. And we just happened to go to Saffron Walden one afternoon. I found the sales room and I went in and had a look. And by the time I came out, we'd agreed that that's where I was going, and I wanted the flat on the 4th floor, in the corner.
And your family was an important part of this decision?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they were there. My daughter thought it was wonderful. My son lives in Denmark. He came home. He came and looked. We did all the, we came to the cheese and wines and we tried it all out.
And your family, Pauline, Chris get very involved in the place, don't they?
Well, yes, because they only live up the road, and then they were very supportive. They said, "Mum, just do it," and so that was it.
And they're part of the community here now.
Well, yes, they're backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
But
I gather your grandson
No,
has
it's
helped
my
everybody out
grands-
with the Wi-Fi
It's my
here.
grandson. It's my
It's your
grandson.
grandson. Help everybody
Yeah.
out with the Wi-Fi. Very
But,
briefly then,
Yes.
has it ticked all the boxes for you? Are you happy and does it do what you expected?
Well, I can say yes, but there were lots of snags when we moved in. That was the only downfall, as you can imagine. Every new property has got snags, and my goodness, did we have snags. But they were all corrected and they were all put right. And I feel very happy here. I feel very contented. I've got an outside life because I've got the car, so I do social things outside of Debden Grange. But I do like the community here. And if you feel a bit low, you can come over to the clubhouse. There's always somebody here to talk to, or sit out on the patio with a glass of wine. Really?
Pauline, the same for you?
Yes, I think so. And I think the very fact that we moved in and COVID came about and we
Yes.
were all locked down. And then the team are fantastic. And we
Yes.
had Zoom afternoons and we had music, we had food delivered to us. You can't ask for any more, can you?
I tell you what, you were a pair of poster girls for community living, aren't you? Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for the meantime. But Zoe, I'd like to come back to you because currently, as I understand it, there are 77,000 people here in the country actually living in retirement villages. The potential, though, is for a community that's closer to 3 million, isn't it? So how are you going to get the message across so eloquently there, given to us by Chris and Pauline, that actually if you live in a retirement village, it is not just a sort of cosy, slow lane into God's waiting room, but something that's really worth going for?
Yeah, I think just as a sector, we need to collaborate to say, what we all mean by retirement living, and give a sort of clear and consistent lexicon around it, just to say, this is what retirement living is, this is the life that you can build, and it's not about moving into something that is different to the life that you're having, but it expands on it and it develops it, and you can thrive where you are, and continue to expand within the community, contribute to the wider community, and not be sectioned away.
No, that's true.
But it is an image problem, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is an image problem, and I think we don't really see much of the retirement industry. I think we see more of the care home industry, and people believe that it's that. So it's just about making sure that the message is consistent across the industry, and that when we're talking to planners and we're talking to policymakers, that they understand what we mean. And I think Gareth can give a better overview of what we mean with the policy side of things. But as a retirement living operator, we're trying very much to be the voice of what retirement living means and what we mean by senior living going forwards.
And Gareth, in fact, not only do you understand all of the complications and the blockages that there are to achieving the kind of thing that Zoe's been talking about, but also can you give me an overview of what it's like in the rest of the world? I've seen a document that refers to this as being a peculiarly British problem. I mean, how does Britain shape up against the rest of the world when it comes to talking about retirement villages?
That's absolutely right. If we look at the size of the sector in the UK, only about 0.6% of the over 65s live in retirement communities, so housing where care is available in the UK. In New Zealand, Australia, the US, Canada, you're getting off for 6.5%. And part of it is that those countries have really seen the potential, really seen how it can deliver a great quality of living, how it can benefit people from a health and social care perspective, and actually how it can free up housing in the community as well. So the governments of those countries have got behind the housing with care sector. They've put specific regulation in place so that people know what it is they're buying and are able to find it, so that local councils can make sure that they get these things built. And we've seen the results over there over the last 20 years as the sector has exploded. And that's what we're looking to see in the UK as well. We think we need that.
But how are you going to get that message across? I mean, I've been talking to a few people before I came to do this, and they all said, yeah, but it's all old people there. We don't want to go where there's all old people. Yeah. But I mean, if it works, and there are old people, but clearly the younger people get involved as well. So what is it that they're doing in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand? I'm not going to mention America because I think that's slightly different. But what is it that they're doing in those countries that make those communities so attractive that we can't seem to latch on to?
And I think we are doing it all over here. It's just that it's still a relatively small sector, so not everyone's noticed yet. I mean, where we are now in Debden Grange, they brought back the village post office. So it's Newport now has a post office that the wider community can come into and use. And that many of our members have become hubs for the wider community, for the town, opening their restaurants, opening their facilities up, bringing people in. And the more that happens, the more it will, that people will start to see that we do need far more of these. It's not shutting older people away in somewhere that's not very pleasant. It's actually great for them and great for the wider area. And we think that policymakers are just about starting to get this. There was a debate about this in Westminster a couple of weeks back, and politicians of about 5 different parties were on board with it. And we are calling for the government to put together a task force which will help to develop the rules that we need to make this take off. And if we can believe what the Minister has said recently, and I'm sure we can, we should be expecting an announcement on this quite soon. We definitely need it.
What are you expecting him to say? Because this is important.
Absolutely. So saying that the way the government's always dealt with things in the past, that there's not this understanding that housing and quality of life and things like social care are connected. But every decision about care is a decision about housing as well. And so the different government departments that deal with these areas, the Department of Health, the Department of Local Government and such like, we've called for them to get together, get a team on this that can start to develop these specific laws, starting with a clear name that makes sense for everyone when they're trying to look for these things, as well as some guidance for local authorities to get more built, and some more reassurance for people when they're trying to move in so they know what the deal is and what they can expect.
What you're suggesting is something that I was going to talk about a bit later, but you brought it up, and that is the name. I mean, do we have to think about the vocabulary here, Mark?
I think so, because even ourselves, we talk about later living, we talk about retirement living, we talk about housing with care, we talk about care homes, and there's no clear distinction between any of those, and it sort of almost falls upon the operator to how they want to brand themselves, rather than having a clear defined scope for everything.
I'm looking at 10 different descriptions here: sheltered housing, assisted living, close care, extra care, later living, independent living, housing with care, retirement living, retirement communities, retirement villages, senior living. You're fed up before you even get to the end of them, don't you? I mean, you've got all of those different. Zoe, very briefly, I mean, the language, the vocabulary, have you got to get that changed?
Yes, absolutely. I think just for people to be able to understand what you mean when you say that you're moving into a retirement village like Debden Grange, you have to have the background to that as well. So, I think we use the term senior living, but it's for all of the sector to, I think, agree, as I said, the lexicon on what we should be, how we should be terming ourselves.
Yeah, in other words, you're thinking that people think immediately of care homes, which of course provide an entirely different service from the sort of thing you're going to get in a retirement village, but you're all kind of lumped in together.
And also, when you say retirement village, you think that you have to be retired. You don't necessarily have to be retired. You can still be inactive in work, but it is the opportunity to be completely relaxed and retired if you want, or continue doing some of the work that you've enjoyed doing over the years.
Well, your starter for 10 for all of you is to come up with a word other than retirement village when we get to the very end of the programme, so you've got time to think about it. But Mark and Anne-Marie together, I mean, in your different ways, you are both really very much involved with the look and the design of communities where people over 60 can live. Yes?
Yes.
Anne-Marie, for instance, what have you got on your drawing board at the moment, just to give us an idea of the sort of thing that you do?
Well, actually some really exciting projects, and it just gives will give a flavour as to how diverse the options can be. So we've got a scheme down on the south coast which has got an open air Lido, tapping into the sort of seaside, quintessentially British side.
They might want to move.
Why would you move to the seaside if and there's outdoor swimming's all the rage at the moment. We have a scheme which is bang on the high street in a market town where the shops are part of the facility itself. You can partition them off, but it means that you really are bringing everybody in. You go and have a drink there, your gin and tonic, or you have a meal, and you don't realise you're in someone's home because you're not in their home downstairs, you're in the shared amenities. Right in the centre of town, near to all the facilities. It creates a sustainable way of living, doesn't it? Because it means that you don't necessarily rely on your car if you don't want to or you can't. Visitors, it's easier for people to come and see you. You can pop to the dry cleaners, pop to the GP surgery, or go and buy some chocolates or some wine from the high street, obviously, like we do in our own homes. And we've got some rural schemes which are rather like this one, I suppose, on the edge of a town, on the edge of a village, which are a destination in their own right. And so you're pulling people in from the outside. There's endless.
And what do you call these developments?
We've got a catch-all phrase of later living, because we feel like it's a sort of an overarching sector under which all of these different typologies sit. And I was thinking when you were having the conversation earlier about why is the UK so, why is the perception so bad? And I think we actually were doing quite well previously, whether we haven't got everything right, but there was a real focus on social housing. And everyone understood what sheltered housing was. But then there started to become these varying degrees of sheltered housing. And then you went into a care home, and then you went to hospital and you died. And 25 years ago when I started my career, people woke up to the fact that actually, what you were saying, Chris, you just want to move once and you want it to be right. And but I then did a tour around the UK of about 60 different schemes and found that there were people living there who they were supposed to be in purpose-built accommodation. They couldn't make themselves a cup of tea. And I thought, as a designer, I've got to do something about that. And I've been dedicating my career to it ever since, to make sure that if you're going to build something and you know that someone is going to live there who's going to get older, design it properly.
Yeah.
Design it so that it can either be adjusted, amended, or that it's from day one beautiful, not clinical, and usable.
And then becomes their forever home.
Becomes their forever, if they want it to be.
Exactly.
You've still got the choice.
Mark, what about the environment? Because that's, I think, really important when it comes to planning, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
also, what Anne-Marie was just really sort of touching on, the technology that is now available to us and will be going into the future for all the generations that come after us.
I mean, we're seeing in the sector that a lot of people are focusing on healthy homes because there's a real focus on health and well-being. And the fundamentals of that haven't changed. Everyone likes fresh air and daylight, which is a strange thing to say with the curtains shut and the windows closed.
Well, there's a technical reason for that.
No, exactly. But it makes a real difference. People want light and airy spaces. We know that as you get older, your site changes slightly in terms of adaptation to light. So making sure there's lots of daylight and good lighting of the space is important. We know that in a restaurant space, we want it to look fantastic, but we don't want the sound to bounce around, so it's really uncomfortable for people to hear, because you want people of all ages to want to use the space and be able to converse. And as you say, tech is really coming on into its own now, and the opportunities in a way are endless, and you can use the tech to create the adventure for the resident. You're moving in, you've got all these new things to try, new things to play with, toys. But you can also use it to help with the care sometimes in terms of a sort of more passive way, that as you get older you can use sensors just to check on things, to make sure things are being used and people are being looked after, if people want that. But
Yes.
it's about variety of choice, and really just about creating amazing spaces that look, sound and feel fantastic.
You talk about creating amazing spaces. I mean, we have here on this site not just the lovely independent living that you guys can enjoy, but you also have a care home. So presumably there is the opportunity and possibility, if you need it, to move from one. You see, oh no, don't want to do that. But it's there. And I wonder, Zoe, very briefly, if you think that that is something that is important as a way of ensuring that people can not necessarily just move once, but actually be in the environment where they can move from the independent living into the more protected living, if that's what they need medically later in life.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option for people to move from their home into a care home. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that people can live healthily longer, so that the drop-off point where your health deteriorates is shortened, so that your quality of life is better for longer. And we can do that through keeping people active and keeping them healthy through being part of the community and physically active as well. But it does give you the comfort, I think, if you've got the support there if you need it. It does give you the comfort to know that it's there if you need it, but not, before you need it. And I think that's one of the drawing factors for people moving into a community like ours, is that it's not in your face. It's there when, at a point that you need it. Yeah.
Gareth, do you want to pick up on that, Gareth?
Yes, absolutely, because actually a number of our members have got this experience. A number of our members have a care home as part of the wider retirement community site.
Should we just explain that when you talk about your members, you've got, 21 of them?
So we've, in terms of, we've got 28 fully verified members, and there are another 8 on the way into ARCO at the moment.
But these are people who run care homes?
Run retirement communities. And a number of them have care homes on site, and many of them anticipated that, residents will end up moving into those care homes at the end of their stay there. Actually, what most have found is that nearly all the residents in the care home have come from outside, because these places are so good at keeping people well and healthy and independent for longer. Actually, the chances of ending up in a care home are so much less as a result, and I think that's part of what makes this sector so attractive in so many different countries.
Yeah, we've got questions coming in already. Actually, let's go very quickly to one of them, and I think is it Will Box?
Will Bax.
Will Bax. Sorry, can't quite see there. Will Bax says, "I'd be interested in Chris and Pauline's view on how we can engage future customers more effectively." And in fact, it's one of the questions I've got for the panel a bit later on. But in the meantime, have you guys got any thoughts on that? Pauline, what do you think? Because you said how important it was that your family were part of the decision that you made.
Yes, I think that's the point. I think the fact that if we can open it up to families more to come and see before we start, and that will help, because if your family's on board, you will be on board. I think it is a difficult one. I think, like you've said, it's an area that is very difficult to break into, and it's that difference between the care and the retirement.
What reaction did you get from friends of your generation when you said you were going to move into a community?
When can we come for coffee? Seriously,
Yes.
I've had lots of friends come, and now they want to come, and they're coming back for lunches, and
So it's
being
actually
part of
experiencing
it. They want to experience it, which
Yeah.
is what we're trying here amongst ourselves to encourage.
Chris?
Just well, it's the same situation. Living in the village, I do have lots of friends, and whenever they come for lunch, oh, this is nice. This is really lovely.
And what was their opinion before, do you think?
Well, their opinion before was the fact that we're having a care home, or a care home and a retirement village in Newport. That was the attitude.
Yeah, negative then.
Very, very negative. I think probably also because it's a new build, and a lot of people are anti-new build. You can appreciate that when you live in a village. But the friends I brought up think it's lovely. Really, really, and of course I showed them the cottage. Oh, this is nice. Oh, it's nice and roomy. And
So the answer to his question is that actually it's just making them available and accessible for people to come in and see what they really are.
Come and have lunch,
Yes.
come and have a look round, yes.
Yeah, I must admit, whenever I've been in some of the modern care homes,
Yes.
when families have come in, and I've said to them, what do you think? They said, I'm booking a room. They want. How can planning policies be changed to acknowledge the demographic need and subsequent benefits to social health, healthcare, and the freeing up of family housing? And that is Paul Davies, who's an architect. I think that's one for you, Gareth.
Sure, happy to lead off on that. So last year, Professor Les Mayhew from London's Business School put out a report which said that if we could provide for all the people who'd want to move into a setting like this, we could free up 24 million rooms in family homes. So there's huge potential out there. But as it stands, the ministerial guidance doesn't make the distinction between the different kinds of housing for older people. And there's a planning white paper that came out recently, which didn't refer to our ageing population and demographics at all once. That is now turning into the planning bill, which will be debated in Parliament later this year. And we and our member organisations will be making the case very strongly that you can't just ignore that we do have an ageing population. The number of people aged over 75 is going to double, and we do need to make sure there are good options for them to choose in future. And we think that will be well received in Parliament, because increasingly there is a recognition that we haven't been getting it right.
Bearing in mind, of course, that so many of their voters are of that age group.
That helps.
It does help. Is this something you come up against, Anne-Marie?
Oh, all the time. I mean, the planning situation is one of the biggest barriers to actually developing it. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about, when you come and visit these schemes, it's an eye-opener and turns the perception.
Yes.
And there was a recent appeal that our company was involved with, a planning appeal. And I know that, and it was published in her report, the planning inspector visited another scheme to see it for herself. And it was it wasn't the only thing that moved her decision, but it was a fundamental one, because she understood it. And I don't think unless you see it, you get it.
That's true.
And I've taken planning officers, councillors around schemes in the past, and it's great that the community, this collegiate community of providers and operators, allow each other into their buildings, and that has to be done, because we don't have the planning policy in place to do it, so we're going to have to do some hard work ourselves, and that's get the message out there, come and have a look.
You're expecting a decision within a couple of weeks, or an announcement within a couple of weeks. How long is it going to take to implement those kind of decisions?
Oh, that's crucial, because the last thing we'd want would be for a government task force to be announced and then for it to take over a year to come out with a report, and then another year before it implements anything. We think that there'd have to be a quick interim report after a couple of months saying these are things that you can do right now to make sure that councils are putting provisions in the local plan for different kinds of specialist housing like this, so that they would be making changes to some of the legislation going through Parliament. So we would hope that we'd see some progress this autumn. We can't afford to wait another year or two.
If you can't afford to wait another year or two, is that because all of the research that you've done and that your company has done into this as well indicates that there is actually I mentioned that a possible 3 million, that there really is an appetite out there for living in a community like this, and that actually if you don't get a move on with it, you're going to have a real problem, because there just isn't going to be the accommodation for people who are 60 plus.
Absolutely, this is people's lives now, and people want to be able to enjoy their old years as much as possible. And actually, lacking that option for people just isn't fair. So all of our members over the last 18 months have reported an increase in inquiries. I think COVID has made it more clear to people how much they value community, how much they value good housing, how much they value facilities, and it's become increasingly clear that all of our members are facing increased demand for this. We just need to be able to sort out the problems around supply.
Yeah, well, it leads us on nicely to a question here from, I think it's Sarah Hill. Do the panel believe that moving into a retirement village is a property sale or a lifestyle change? Mark?
I think you're buying a lifestyle, because I think actually what we're seeing in the later living is that you're buying some of the best residential accommodation you'll see, with leading sort of zero carbon credentials and a real focus on health and well-being. And on top of it, you get all of this amenity and space like a luxury hotel. So I think you're actually getting the best of both worlds. And so really, you're buying into a whole lifestyle and a way of life. And as you say, somewhere to bring your friends and impress them.
Yes.
And the coffee is good here. So
But it does involve selling your property. So Zoe, what would your answer be to Sarah, who's asked this question? Property sale or lifestyle change?
Yeah, it's definitely a lifestyle change or a lifestyle enhancement. So you're buying into something that's really should be enhancing your life and taking away some of those sort of dire things like getting the leaves out of your gutter. If you find out how to do that, then let me know. But also, you are buying into a community. You're buying into being part of something that's bigger than just your social group. and the property just comes as an additional sort of extra for it. Yeah, it's definitely a lifestyle that you're buying into.
Let me ask the question then that comes directly from this, which in a way can be the elephant in the room. I think we're all familiar with the term skiing, spending the kids' inheritance, which means, you know, you're going to buy and therefore you're going to sell your property, you're going to move into something that you buy or you rent, but you are spending the kids' inheritance, as it were. How much of an issue is that with families? Guys, how much of that was an issue with your families?
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
No. I sold my property, and the difference between buying them is what will keep my lifestyle here, and as far as my family were concerned, that was all that mattered.
Chris?
Exactly the same. They said, Mum, just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Don't worry about our inheritance. Go ahead. Because they'd seen it and they said, yes, it's right, do it.
Yeah. Is it something that your members come up against in any way?
Yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly, what we hear from children is the same as what you were just saying, which is they want their parents to be able to enjoy their lives as much as possible, and that's what would make them most happy. But also, actually, when they think about inheritance, many of them are also aware that, well, if mum and dad are more likely to avoid having to move into a care home, that might actually save them some very substantial care fees in future. So actually, in some ways, it's a good way of being able to preserve that inheritance, even though that's not the primary motivator.
No. And also, presumably, if you get that sort of support from your family, it means that they're more likely to come into the building. So just to go back to the question that Will asked originally, how we can engage future customers more effectively, how about the use of social media, for instance? Because I think if you want more recognition, it has got to come from a younger generation as well, hasn't it? I mean, Zoe, for instance, have you thought about using TikTok, social media in some way, to get to that earlier generation, if you like, because they may be the people that need convincing, not just that this is the place for their parents or their loved ones to come, but perhaps for them in their own future.
Yeah, we do see the family members as the influencers, and we do try and attract them as well and give them a thorough understanding of what it is that we're providing here. Some of our village managers have got involved with TikTok and some sort of dances and videos, but social media, we do use Facebook to attract people and to just engage the community. But I think mostly it's, as Chris and Pauline have said, it's about bringing people in. So Debden Grange is open to the wider community. As Gareth said, we have the post office there, so it's of use to people as well. So it's just about encouraging them and creating a place that's an environment that people can come in and use. It's not a closed or gated community. It's open, and if your family can come and visit you and have lunch and have the best Sunday lunch in the area there, then all the better. And if it's the best coffee for your friends to come and have your social Tuesday natter around whatever gossip is happening in the wider village, then brilliant. So for us, I think it's about just engaging people and bringing them together in person, as well as showing them what it is via social media.
With respect, that still means that you are talking about, if you like, a fairly restricted community. You are talking about the people who are, as it were, living adjacent to your properties, and the same with your own members, Gareth. If you're going to reach those 3 million, that potential 3 million, surely you're going to have to cast your net wider than that. And getting through to the people who live adjacent to a building like this is relatively straightforward, I would have thought. They can come and poke their nose in and decide whether they like it or not without any difficulty at all. How are you going to get to all of those people that do not live near in a community where they can come and physically and personally experience what it looks like, what it has on offer, and talk to residents like Chris and Pauline about what it means to their lifestyle? Isn't that the audience you've got to get to if we're going to get some kind of universal acceptance that there isn't a negative attitude to living in a retirement community? Gareth?
Absolutely it is, and that's really what we're all striving for. So most of our members do have quite a good social media presence already, Facebook and Twitter, as do we. You can follow us at ARCO Tweets, if you'd be interested, Angela. But the key thing is being able to get the message out there in every possible way. We also engage with a lot of journalists to try and get the message out. When there's something that's particularly newsworthy that will catch people's attention, then we do see a lot of interest spiking around social media. So Channel 4 ran for a couple of years the Old People's Home for 4-year-olds programme, which was based in a couple of our members. We saw so much more engagement when people could see these places firsthand. Our members produce some really good videos which they share via social media, so do we. And it's just keep on chipping away at that and trying to build up on it. Also hoping we do get that key bit of content that goes viral. And I'll definitely make a note of your TikTok suggestion as well.
Can't wait to see what you're going to do on TikTok. But Mark, I mean, your company is also interested not just in facilitating many of these things, but doing the kind of research that in fact we really based this whole meeting on.
I mean,
isn't it?
we think this is an exciting sector. It's kind of targeted by most institutional investors because it is such an exciting sector, and it's something that we all need. And in answer to your question about how we get everyone to see it, well, the answer is to build a community in every community and create that facility for everyone, because it does provide a real benefit to the wider community when you've got people coming in and people going out into the community. And we've done the research because, you know, it seems like the best kept secret almost. Some of these places are absolutely stunning and great places to be, and yet no one knows about them, and they've still got this vision of the sort of, you know, sat round in a circle playing bingo, wipe down surfaces and grab rails and stuff. And it's a real shame because actually, in a way, this sector is leading the residential sector in terms of the product they're offering, the quality of environment and things like that. So we want to really promote that and try and do better.
Yeah. Let me, yes, Pauline.
I'll just make a point really, that I do wonder whether perhaps the time has come when the people as yourselves come down here and come and sit and talk to us. As we live here, and it may be that that's the way then to, you know, it's always easy, isn't it, to say we know or we don't know, but come and talk to us and we'd all be very happy to share.
Well, you're the consumers, so let me put you on the spot, Pauline. If we were to, well, you are doing it at this moment.
Yes.
You are talking to an audience, not just here, but there, of some 80 people. What would you like to say to them? To say, you know, get the message out there to make people realise what is really important.
You've really got to understand the people that live here.
Yeah.
I think the fact that if you talk about U3A, people don't immediately say that's old people. You say retirement village, it's old people, and that's definitely the concept we've got to change.
Because it's the image, it's that negative image.
It is the negative
word
image,
old.
that's right, yes.
Yeah, but it is a place for people over 60. I mean, let me be devil's advocate here. I mean, you know, I don't see any toddlers or teenagers running around.
Not today.
Not today.
But when our families come, it becomes a complete multi-age
Lots
environment.
of children running, grandchildren running around, which is lovely.
Yes.
It's lovely.
As they would be if you were still living,
That's right.
not
Exactly.
in a community, but
Yeah.
in your own
In your
individual
own
home.
Yes.
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 And when you talk about designing spaces for people over 60, that's the same age range as 20 to 60. So you've got a massive demographic of different people and different tastes.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's about what the consumer wants and actually having that variety of choice for the consumer, because as you said at the beginning, Angela, it's about having, some people want to live in their own home and they're happy, and other people want to come and use facilities like this and have a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a cottage, you have a flat.
Yes.
So slightly different.
Yes.
Chris, living in a cottage, does that make you feel that you have total independence?
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah?
Mm. Mm. I feel totally independent in as much as the arrangement is they'll come and take your rubbish down to the, no, I'll do that myself. So that type of independence, I have the car, I go all over, you know, all over Newport, sorry Pauline. Yes, I quite often go out for the day and go and see family, and that's my independence, and that's what I love.
Yes.
Just
But at the
doing
same
what I want
time,
to do.
You've got the security of knowing that there's all of that
Yes.
sort of safety net around
Exactly.
you if you need it.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yes.
And it's the same for me. I'm on
Yes,
the
you feel the
fourth
same,
floor.
don't you?
Yes, I'm up on the fourth floor. I've got my balcony. I can sit out there and I can do everything I did in my other home.
Yes.
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 I want to come back, Gareth, to you, because I said earlier when we were talking about what was happening in Australia and New Zealand, I'll come back to America later, because I think a lot of people will have got an impression of living in a retirement community from what they've seen on television over many years of the kind of, I think they call them sunset homes, don't they, in America. And believe it or not, that put people off, didn't it? What is it about the American system that you don't like, that you don't think would ever work here, and yet it's very, very popular and successful in America?
I suppose what's much more important is whether, not whether I like it or not, but whether older people themselves in the UK would like it or not. So let's take an extreme example of this. There was a film that came out last year, it's called Some Kind of Heaven, and it looked at what the largest retirement village in America. It's got about 110,000 people living in it, and people travel from all over the country to live there. And people were saying, oh, we never leave. We live amongst all these other old people, and it's miles away from home. But I've never picked up a desire for that in the UK. People like to move to villages which are not more than a handful of miles away from where they've been living so far, because they like the area, they want to be living with their families. We don't detect any kind of desire for a village of 100,000 people at the end of Cornwall, for example. We are very much detecting a desire for between sort of 100, 150, 200 units, which means that you can develop the sense of community that you've got here and the facilities work. I would be astounded if the sector in the UK were to develop down the American model. Much more what we see in New Zealand and Australia is that 200, 250 units kind of village where there's people all know each other. Here the village manager knows every resident and will do as it fills out. There's no way you could know 100,000 people. It wouldn't really be a community, and that sense of community is really at the heart of what makes these successful.
Yeah. And presumably, Anne-Marie, you said that you travelled around and you've seen a lot of these things. The community you were describing down on the south coast, where are the flats or the homes that you have built on top of shops that were already there, or have you created a whole new shopping centre? I wasn't quite sure what you meant there.
So there are two different projects we're talking about. One is actually at a seaside location where there are no shops, just the local shops nearby, and the other one is on top of the shops.
And they were already there?
And they were already, yes, they were already being repurposed.
So what you produced is a real integrated community?
Totally integrated. And yes, intergenerational, and I think we've got to do that and this, have separate communities as well, because that's what people want, that's where they live, because we've heard, I'm not sure we said it in this session, but people will probably move 3 miles from their own home to get to their new home. Whereas I think if you're going to a seaside destination, you might move a bit further because it's an aspirational thing. I mean, the practice I work for has got offices in New Zealand and Australia as well, and my colleagues there tell me the reason it's so popular and so accepted is because there is so many. There is one in every suburb, as they call it. It's just normal. It's actually, there is an Act of Parliament that encourages it. So they have the policy and the framework to actually set it up. It's accepted, and I think all the sort of fiscal issues that go with it are accepted, and there's a route to it. We've got a few problems here and a bit of history to overcome. We will get there. It's just, as you say, about shouting from the rooftops how amazing this is, and that it's not a care home. Yeah.
So I mean, given that, if you do indeed get the legislation that you would like, Gareth, how do you all see the sector looking, say, 20 years from now? Zoe, how do you think how do you hope that this kind of community is going to be received generally by the population, say, in 20 years' time?
Well, we hope it will be aspirational. We hope that people will say, I can't wait until I can move into one of those. Can I hurry up in age, please? So I think we see it as being integrated into the community, places that people want to go and live, places where people will thrive and can continue to do the social pieces that they've been doing to really stay active and well. So yeah, for me, it's about maintaining a sort of aspirational view of this is where I want to spend my later years and my final days, perhaps.
Yeah, and I mean, not only you, but Gareth also has mentioned several times being well. That do you see this actually then as a way of ensuring that we spend less money perhaps on the NHS, that there's less need for people in later life to need to call on those resources because they do have physically and mentally so much more stimulation in their lives by living in a community like this?
Definitely, and there's a lot of evidence that Aston University's done a lot of work on this with the Exchequer Charitable Trust, and it has shown that people actually get healthier, they get more active, more independent after moving in. And the perception is that, oh, you're moving into your 70s and 80s, you might be less active. Actually, all the evidence shows it's the opposite when you move in, and so it can have huge impacts on health and social care, but also it can do on the wider community as well. So I mentioned Old People's Home for 4-year-olds. Those kids being able to interact with the older people there benefited them. We know that if there's one of these at the heart of every town and community in the country, everyone will be able to benefit from interacting more there, using these facilities, being involved. To answer your original question, in 20 years' time, I'd like it to be the case that we have the opposite problems of what we have now. We'd be inundated as a trade association with local councils saying, why haven't your members opened one of these in my town quickly enough? I genuinely think we will end up being there, because these things have such a big role to play in reviving communities. They can, we're seeing towns across the country now where they're seeing the role of retirement communities in regenerating town centres, because you bring a lot of people into one place who want to be more active, want to be more engaged. They'll draw their families in, and it can benefit the local shops and facilities as well. I think we're just scratching the surface of the potential for this sector now.
But it is a long-term plan in that respect.
Yeah, things are speeding up, but larger charities, large investors are starting to wake up to the potential of this sector now. We're hoping government's about to as well, and that given that there's no shortage number of people that want to live in these places now, it really is just about being able to ramp up quickly, and we know there are things that we can do to speed that up.
Yeah. Interestingly, Anne-Marie, a couple of years ago I was involved in believe it or not, though I'm not an architect, an architectural competition for students, architectural students, to design a perfect retirement community. And every one of those designs included some way of incorporating not just being able to visit, but actually being able to live within that community with older people, going back to the Channel 4 idea of, an old people's home for 4-year-olds. And there is a project that I'm aware of in Plymouth where they're building, as part of the medical and dental school, an opportunity for people who are not just the students to live in as student accommodation, but veterans from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force and the Royal Marines, which, they have quite a large community in the West Country, and that they can also live in that building, but the medical and dental students have to look after them. So they have a communal area like this where they can all get together, but they also have to look after their teeth, make sure that if they're unwell, they can look after them. So there is a feeling among young people, isn't there, that they do want to have that kind of integrated lifestyle and not see that people over 60 are put in a silo and behind a gated community where they never have any contact.
Well, I think it's as a culture, we're very happy to sort of let our parents do their own thing, and we pull away and become more independent. And actually, there are other cultures, aren't there, that keep their older people with them. And I think there is so much for the younger generation to learn and to get from their older friends, their older relatives, which means that they have to be able to either be in places where they can get to them or where they can actually both benefit, and that benefit that comes to both is it's obviously a sort of a trial, isn't it? It's let's see, and it has to be really carefully managed, because I don't think you can socially engineer it and then leave it. I think there has to be an organisation that wants to oversee that kind of thing and make sure that it doesn't slip in favour of all young people or all older people. It's a really exciting opportunity to make sure everybody gets the best out of each other.
And that's what we're going to be aiming for over the next 10 or 20 years, you think?
Well, I think so. And for my career, I've seen that the schemes that I was asked to design were always packaged off in the corner somewhere quiet and not a destination. And I want to encourage master planners, town planners, local authorities to realise that having the public who happen to be over 65 living right in the centre is a really good idea. They've got lots to offer.
Very much so. Mark, how do you see?
Well, I think you've got residents with a wealth of life experience, and why not use that life experience in the wider community? I mean, I think that in 20 years' time, what you want to see is that a retirement community is in every community. It's a bit like the village shop or the post office 20 years ago, because it provides facilities, it provides amenities, and it's somewhere you want to go and mix. It's not just a place for old people, it's a place for everyone. And I don't think we should see it as old people or young people. I just see it as a fantastic space and a community facility that everyone can engage in.
Yes, in other words, you can come and use the gym if you want to join the gym as a membership. You can come and swim in our swimming pool, you can play on our pitch and putt course or our golf course or whatever.
Yeah.
You can actually be part of that retirement community.
Yeah, and I think, as we've talked about, that life experience has a real benefit to play in the community, in terms of helping young people, mentoring, things like that you can actually gain from that. And I'm sure the residents in lots of these places will ask you, because you'll know better than me, but we'd be more than happy to help people in the community and
definitely
share your sort of experiences.
Yes.
And
Your life experiences and your knowledge, because it's all there, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. It's interesting. Again, it's not. It looks like Vox, but it's not. Bax. I'm so sorry. Says, I agree that digital presence is key, and Pauline is right that those stories must come from those who live here, and their stories are invariably amazing.
Yes. I think one of the things we've got to think about is last Thursday we had a cheese and wine party here, and if anybody had been here, I defy you to say it was an old people's place.
Say no more.
Well, I'm going.
We're all back
Two
next
very
Thursday.
quick questions, because we're coming to the end of our hour. It has absolutely flown past. Each of you on our panel, I want to know, because you've all clearly defined, you've all got a very clearly defined pathway and objectives for actually making retirement communities acceptable to a much wider community, but also to make sure that they're fit for purpose, for design, affordability, and health and mental and social benefits, to get all of those messages across. In a couple of sentences, how do each of our four main panelists think you're going to get that message across? Gareth.
Two things. It starts with us. We need to be extremely clear about what we call them and how they are not care homes or retirement housing. They are housing with the facilities integrated on site, care available. It's all about community. So we need to get our act together as a sector and keep banging that drum. And then the other thing you won't be surprised for me to say is legislation. The government needs to recognise the benefits here and get behind the sector, give it a really clear backing, and that will encourage the investors who are already showing strong interest in this sector to really pile in and to really help it grow.
Zoe, very briefly, how are you going to do it?
Same as Gareth, with the consistency of message, and the second one is around listening to our current residents and the residents of the future. Ask them, what do you want? And if they say something that we haven't thought of before, go with it, trial it, try these things, see if they work, and if they do, amazing. If they don't, start again. So for us, it's about speaking to people and finding out what they actually want.
Anne-Marie.
I think being a professional in this sector and having specialised in it, I think there's an awful lot of impetus on me and others like me to actually share our experience. I talked about the collaboration between operators and looking at each other's schemes, but we've got a wealth of knowledge as well, and I think the private sector can actually hold on to it a little bit, and I'm all about sharing it and discussing it and learning from each other. So I'm going to continue to do that.
Mark?
change the word retirement to adventure. Make it something to look forward to.
Yes. Yeah, because you preempted the last question I was going to ask, which is, have we come up with any words yet? But apart from doing that, what else do you think you can do on a practical level with the kind of people that are tuned into this at the moment?
Just get as many people as you can into these places, into the restaurants, into the coffee lounges, and let them see that actually, you know, it's one of the best places to be in the community.
Yeah.
I think it's about seeing, because once you're here, why would you go anywhere else when you come here for coffee?
You're so
Yeah.
right. You're so right.
All right, I will now let you tell me, because I did say your starter for 10 is, by the end of the programme, come up with a way of describing what we're talking about in a way that does not suggest ageism in some way. You've kind of already done it.
I've done it, adventure.
What are you going to call them? Adventure?
Adventure homes, yeah.
Adventure homes.
Done.
Right. Zoe, what's your word?
I think communities for people. That's my word.
So how would you describe then your communities? I mean, retirement communities. What kind? What would it be?
Vibrant, thriving communities.
Thriving community. Okay, Gareth.
I think we need to be proud of the word retirement. Retirement's a good thing. You've earned it, and also I work for an organisation which is called the Associated Retirement Community Operators. So you won't be surprised to hear me saying I think community is important too. Let's stick with retirement communities and sell it.
And sell it. Anne-Marie.
How about later living for legends? There's plenty of you.
Later living for legends. Well, I'm going to move to our two legends and ask them. Have you thought, Pauline, of a way of describing it?
No, it's very difficult. It is so many different things in so many different ways that it's right, it's an adventure. It is one that we're having in retirement. And yes, it's about making a new life and expanding on what we've already had.
Yeah. Chris?
I feel the same. It's not making, it's having a new life.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And it's meeting lots of new people. And some of the residents here have such interesting stories of what they did when they were working. And I just enjoy being here. And everybody I see said, oh, it's so nice here. And that's how I feel. Just
Lovely note on which
quite
to
content.
end. Thank you. Content.
Yes.
Contented.
Contented, yes.
Well, thank you all very much indeed. On your behalf, let me thank Gareth, Anne-Marie, Mark, Zoe, who are, if you like, industry experts, but as they've turned out to be, both Chris and Pauline, experts too. And thank you to all of you for joining us, and I hope that you found what we've been talking about over the last hour really interesting, because I certainly have. You have a lovely day. Stay safe and well. Bye-bye.